The radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 104, recorded on Friday, November 3rd from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, we explore the history of America's next top speaker, Mike Johnson.
Who?
But first, the headlines.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
First up in headlines, and this is one I was not only out of town through the end of last week into the weekend, but I was on a fishing trip in which I was away from TV and media and everything almost full 24 hours a day. So while I knew that this had happened, I'd seen a little bit on the news at 10 o'clock. I did not get the coverage that I would have gotten if I had been home or near a computer.
Sure.
So you got to tell me about this one because I do not know all of the intricate details.
So for those of you who haven't heard, we're not going to go on crazy because it's been all over. There was a mass shooting again, this time in Lewiston, Maine, where 18 people were killed and 13 were injured after a gunman opened fire at a local bowling alley.
I think it spilled over into a bar or something.
Yeah,
another site anyway.
You're right. The ages of the victims ranged from 14 to 76. Authorities then located the body of the shooter 2 days after a very long and stressful manhunt. And that's where I think things got really intense, and I'm kind of almost glad you may have missed it, because that's where it was the scariest.
Mm-hmm. I did know that they didn't know where he was. They hadn't located him. And I know the story is that the site that they found him at is like a place that he used to work.
Yeah.
And they looked there immediately, but they didn't check this
trailers.
Extra parking lot.
Yeah.
That's they have just trailers and semis parked there. And that is where they ultimately located his body. He had killed himself. So I would not have wanted to be anywhere around Maine for those 2 days. There were a lot of lockdowns and searches going on. That had to be pretty scary for everyone there.
There was a really pretty terrifying story and sad story about a mother whose son was at a nearby college that had a lockdown. And she was talking about how the son had to be with his roommate, lock down the campus, and it was in his room all day long with the windows shut, and had to just be very quiet just to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, and unfortunately, this wasn't the first time this has happened to the family, because the other older daughter was at, I believe it was Charlottesville, or, oh God, where was it? The University of North Carolina. They also had a recent mass shooting nearby where they also had a lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
So you had the same family have to go through 2 separate lockdown drills because of an active shooter nearby. I could not imagine that as a parent.
Right. And it's becoming pretty common these days, unfortunately.
Right.
Only in this country, nowhere else in the world. No explanation for why. Can't possibly be the ease at which even someone who's had a long history of mental illness can get a gun.
Well, you want to guess what kind of gun it was?
Well, we all know what kind of gun it was. The mascot of the mass shooting in America, the AR-15.
And what's scary is knowing that this guy had a known history of mental illness, and he was in a facility. Representative of Maine, Jared Golden, one of the most conservative Democrats in the House, actually then announced that he changed his mind and now supports an assault weapons ban after the shooting took place in his home state.
So this is what it took for him?
Are you surprised?
All of the other mass shootings that have occurred in the country, even just very recently, none of that was enough, but it had to happen in his home state.
Yep, which also just shows you how bad the discourse around this topic actually is.
Yeah, well, we can't say anything about gun control now, right? It's just happened. We have to let it go for a while until the next mass shooting, and then we can't say anything after that one, and then there'll be another one 3 days later, and we can't say anything. And we just never do anything about it.
Because this is America.
Because of the Second Amendment.
Yep.
Which explicitly says as part of a well-regulated militia, but we just ignore that.
So then let's talk about some of the conservative responses to this. A lot of conservatives and Republicans were seen blaming the FBI because, like I said, he was known for having mental health issues. He actually was a military veteran and was was diagnosed with, I believe, with some kind of schizophrenia or something like that beforehand, and then was in a facility later on, and then was recently released. But his history was well known, and he was still able to get a gun. And again, the Republicans are just so close to understanding the problem there.
It's everything except the ease
gun.
at which you can obtain firearms.
Right. Don Jr. blamed the FBI in a tweet saying, quote, "The Maine shooter was, as always, known to law enforcement, previously committed to a mental institution and prohibited from owning firearms. If only the FBI would stop spying on Catholics, concerned parents at PTA meetings, and MAGA patriots, maybe they'd actually stop real terrorists for a change rather than trying to create them."
Yeah. If only we had laws that actually meant anything when it came to firearms.
Well, again, that's the whole point of this thing. Like,
and real MAGA patriots do not support red flag laws
Nope.
or any gun control legislation at all.
Nope.
Which is what failed in this instance, right? There's no way to enforce. Nobody cares. It takes forever to run all. This has happened before, where people that arguably shouldn't have firearms are still able to obtain them because what little laws we have no bite to them. There is no enforcement. And it's because of people that Donald Trump Jr. supports.
Correct.
But yet he's going to blame, the FBI. They're too busy going after my family when they should have been stopping this guy. This guy should have never been able to come close to a gun store. And the fact that he was able to obtain these firearms is due to the fact that our gun control laws are terrible. No one should be able to own an AR-15. It's stupid.
Yep. Then Jesse Waters basically blamed all of UK for our mass shootings. I don't know if you saw that, where he had Piers Morgan on, and Piers Morgan, being the voice of reason, was talking about how the UK doesn't have these problems and that the US basically needs to figure their crap out. He says that on Fox News with Jesse Waters there.
Right. Well, everything that all these people blame, all of these things like, it's all because of liberalism and single parent families and all this, those conditions exist everywhere in the rest of the world.
Yep.
Don't have these, you want to blame violence in movies and video games or whatever. Again,
Canada's got that.
They consume the same media we do.
Yep.
They don't have mass shootings. The only thing they don't have is the ubiquitous access to assault rifles and any kind of firearm that you can afford. That's the only restriction in this country. It's the same restriction there is on anything. Wealth.
Yep. And basically in response to Piers Morgan, Jesse Waters, in his full-on intellect, says that it's actually all the UK's fault because they're the ones who created our love of guns in the first place.
Because of the Revolutionary War?
Yep. It doesn't go much deeper than that, man.
Well, I'm sure it's not the last we're going to hear from Jesse Waters today.
No, it's not. And what else even scares me too is just one last big point about conservative stuff here is I was even seeing MK Ultra crap.
Well, they are all conspiracy freaks these days.
The idea that, and again, they're so freaking close. They're so close where they're talking about how this guy just snapped and started killing people and that he was clearly mentally ill. And the fact that he would just snap like this must have been some kind of weird government spy experiment gone wrong.
And not just the neglect of all of the mentally ill and specifically military veterans that we have in this country because it costs what? Money.
Yep.
Easier for this guy to get an assault rifle than it was for him to get mental health treatment.
So let's just put it that way. It is easier for conservatives to actually spin a whole mind control conspiracy than just talk about what the real problem is. And we're going to talk about this again and again, just like you said, because this stuff will never stop happening.
Right. You can see our episode on gun control.
Well, you don't have to see it just on one episode. How many episodes did we have something on here?
We've done countless episodes on mass shootings already.
Yep.
Just in the few years that we've been doing this. And we did an entire episode where the focus was talking about gun control and why we don't have any in this country. So if you want to see that, you can see that episode or just wait probably a few weeks until we have to talk about this again.
In other news, there has been a huge shakeup in the 2024 presidential race on both sides.
Ground shaking.
On the Republican side, Mike Pence has officially dropped out of the GOP primary, sending shockwaves throughout the entire country, where no one can believe that the former vice president would end his campaign so early.
All 10 people in Indiana that were going to vote for him. I have to pick somebody else now. Yeah, nobody cares. I mean, who was going to vote for him anyway?
Dude was polling at 4%, I think, at maybe it was like 3%.
He's too conservative for the moderates, and the conservatives wanted to literally hang him. I don't know why he ever thought he would get any votes. We talked about it after the January 6th hearings. If the Republican Party was, like, not completely insane, that Mike Pence would have been a good candidate because he comes out of it looking as, like, this defender of the Constitution because he refused to go along with the plan to overthrow the government, even though it was just barely. And he tried his best to try to find some legal way for him to do this, and even reportedly talked to Dan Quayle, of all people, on whether or not he should go along with this. But he literally just couldn't find anyone who he trusted to tell him to do it, which is why he can pretend now that he was this, courageous freedom fighter. But nobody cares because the people running the Republican Party wanted him to overthrow the government, and they hate him for not doing it.
So now that leaves 7? 6?
Who cares? He's not even the first to drop out. There was I think the mayor of Miami.
Yeah. Well, what's kind of funny too is I know you're not a big fan of polling, Jason, so I'm not going to get too hard into it. But there were recent polling showing in the first 2 states of Iowa and New Hampshire, with Trump dominant still in the 40s. You have Nikki Haley now catching up to Ron DeSantis to now have him be tied for second place at 16% each, and then the rest are all in single digits.
Yeah, it's Trump and no one.
Well, and I heard a really good comparison where one of the most dominant primary forces in recent history was George W. Bush.
Right.
And that was in 2000. And he absolutely crushed his primary and became the nominee for president. And he had an average of like 30% in polls. And Trump's far beyond that.
Right.
Also, can I just say, I just want to point out the poll as well, just to show how much Ron DeSantis has been sucking as a candidate. So can we just take a moment and laugh at how crappy of a person and presidential campaign he is?
And the focus right now is whether or not he's wearing heels in his very weirdly shaped cowboy
Nikki Haley
boots.
got asked that, saying, so are you wearing heels to still try to be taller than Ron DeSantis?
And she said, if you can't run in them, then you shouldn't wear them.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
How pathetic, man. The whole thing.
And he was asked specifically, Ron DeSantis was, and tried to pretend like he had I'd never heard of that before, even though he has. It's all anyone's been talking about for the last week. And oddly enough, what would you do in that position if someone asked you if you were wearing heels in your boots and you had your boots on? You'd think it'd be a real easy way to prove that you weren't, right?
Right.
Just take your boot off, show everybody. No, he didn't do that. So I wonder why.
I can't imagine a worse run campaign.
And it's like he's never seen Gattaca, man. You got to go all in. You got to cut your legs off and get them lengthened and reattached. You got to go full Ethan Hawke.
There you go. But that's not the only news we need to be worried about. Joe Biden now has a challenger.
Well, he's had a few before, right? One thing we didn't talk about is RFK Jr. dropping out of the Democratic primary and moving to be an independent in the general election, because we have a whole full episode on RFK Jr. if you want to listen to that.
And with Cornel West too, he's no longer going to be on the Green Party.
He's dropped out of another political party. And I like Cornel West, but I don't know what the heck he's doing.
I don't know either. But Dean Phillips of Minnesota has now officially entered the Democratic primary. Have you heard of Dean Phillips?
No. I've heard of Dean Cain, the guy. He's in all those Christian movies now, but he was Superman back in like the early 2000s.
That's not this guy.
That's not him?
Nope. This is another different old white guy now. That's as much.
We don't have enough of those in politics. All I know, and I only know since he announced his candidacy for some reason, is that he is basically a super rich conservative Democrat.
Correct.
So he's going to be I'm the moderate Democrat as opposed to Joe Biden?
Yep, precisely.
There's no room there.
And I don't even understand what his point even is anyway, because number one, he's still he's not young, but he's pretty young or green as far as being a congressional representative.
I know he's one of the richest people in Congress.
That too.
Yay.
Right. But number two is because he already signed up so late, he just made the New Hampshire primary primary,
The cutoff.
which is basically going to probably give him the win over there because Joe Biden is boycotting the New Hampshire primary because the DNC elected to start with South Carolina first. So South Carolina.
Yeah, we've talked about this before.
But now New Hampshire's saying, screw you, we're going to do our own thing and we're going to be first anyway. So now he's boycotting it. So basically, I almost said Dean Cain. Dean, was it? Phillips.
I would vote for Dean Cain maybe in the primary. I mean, I don't agree with him, but at least he was Superman.
So Dean Phillips will probably win New Hampshire but
over Marianne Williamson.
Right. But he already missed, I think it was Nevada. He's going to probably miss other ballots. So I don't know what he's doing. I don't know.
And he has no chance anyway.
Right.
Regardless.
What's going on? Go away.
Is this just the maybe Joe Biden will die campaign? Because even in that case, it's going to be
Kamala Harris.
It's just stupid.
It is. And finally, in our last kind of couple of stories here.
In our last couple of
Shut
stories.
up. They're all together. Like we said in the intro, the House of Representatives officially has a speaker and they can officially conduct business of governance. Boy, what a beginning it has been. Let's start with funding the government. That's already been an absolutely tragic.
The first bill that Mike Johnson brought to the floor.
Yep. That's already been an absolute tragic controversy among Republicans because
the so-called standalone funding for Israel bill.
Correct.
Was it that? Not at all.
No. So what Republicans like Mike Johnson would try to say is that we wanted to have a standalone Israel bill that would be not controversial and bipartisan. It would have provided $14.3 billion in funding for Israel, but completely cut out all aid to Ukraine. Because again, Republicans can't decide whether or not we should support Ukraine from Russia.
We definitely should support killing Palestinians to a country that really gets a lot of aid from the U.S. anyway.
Yep.
But not the defense of Ukraine from Russian invasion.
Correct. It passed on a 226 to 196 vote, with by far most Democrats voting against it, and it's already going to be dead. And here's why. Like Jason said, it wasn't just about funding Ukraine, because obviously that money needs to come from somewhere. And while
it really doesn't, but to Republicans sometimes.
Right, because they have the zero sum.
It does. There's a Democratic president, so.
Right. Now, usually what will end up happening is they'll try to cut it from other types of
social programs
always. Or whatever it may be. This time, Johnson just said, screw all of that even, and we're going to try to cut it all from the IRS budget.
Yep, the extra IRS funding that was given by President Biden. The 80,000 agents that are right now lurking outside your homes, ready to pounce. So that was supposed to completely pay for this bill. So this bill cost $14.3 billion. They were going to cut $14.3 billion from IRS funding. Turns out, though, that according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, cutting $14.3 billion from the IRS would actually increase the deficit by almost $12.5 billion over the next 10 years. So instead of offsetting that $14.3 billion that they want to send to Israel so that they can buy more bombs to kill civilians in Palestine and making that budget neutral, essentially, the combination of sending that aid and cutting IRS funding would add a total of $26.8 billion to the deficit over the next decade, according to the CBO. And the reason for that is when you spend money on the IRS, you get more revenue because that's actually
how we get money.
Many people don't know this. The R in IRS actually stands for revenue. And the reason why, we've said this many times before, the reason why Republicans want to cut funding from the IRS and don't want that money coming in is because rich people don't like paying taxes. And rich people are the ones that are donating money to Congress, and also, as we just heard about with Dean Phillips, are in Congress as well. So because of that, they don't want the IRS to have extra funding because they don't like enforcement of tax law. They want to continue not paying their taxes.
Absolutely.
So it's not about funding or lowering the deficit or anything like that, because this does neither of those things. It's just about paying back their donors, which is all the Republican Party is ever there for.
So good start, Mike.
So not only is it not likely to pass the Senate,
Not like it's basically dead.
right, President Biden has already said that he would veto it anyway.
Correct.
If it were to pass. So more nothing from the GOP-led House. What's the next bill that was up?
The next bill is actually a Republican bill that was meant to expel George Santos from the House of Representatives.
The should-be Speaker of the House.
GOP members from New York introduced a motion to expel Santos from the House, and they needed a 2/3 vote to get it passed. And you can kind of guess how this is already going to go.
Yeah, 2/3 vote was never going to happen.
The final vote was 179 to 213, with 19 members voting present and 31 Democrats voting to keep him in.
Including some ones that we're generally pretty positive about.
Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, Rashida Tlaib, and even Milwaukee's Gwen Moore. Now, why would they do such a thing? I'm going to read you a couple of statements from two progressives. First one's from Katie Porter saying, quote, Representative Santos clearly violated the public trust, and I would have voted to censure him, and I do believe it would be appropriate for him to resign. The gravity of expulsion demands due process by the Ethics Committee, our courts, or another impartial fact finder. To date, the Ethics Committee has not finished its investigation, and Rep. Santos has not been convicted. The House would set a dangerous precedent if we expelled a member without allowing one of these processes to conclude.
Which, initially, when I heard this story and that he somehow wasn't expelled, I was a bit curious as to why, and I saw the people that voted against it, and I was even more curious. But listening to their arguments, I would say I am personally convinced that it is a dangerous precedent to, without the normal procedures in place of this coming from the Ethics Committee or after a criminal conviction, I can understand why they voted the way they did.
Right. Well, and Raskin, I'll start in the middle of one of his statements, but basically he said, this would be a terrible precedent to set, expelling people who have not been convicted of a crime and without internal due process, like we just talked about. If and when Santos is convicted of those serious criminal offenses or ethics charges, I will certainly vote to expel him. So, and I do get that as well, where there's a lot of fear of Republicans just starting to expel people just for the sake of
right. If you
tit
don't,
for tat,
yeah,
right?
If you don't need any real official conviction or violation to have taken place, then they can literally just start voting to expel everyone.
And we're already kind of seeing that happen with them trying to impeach Joe Biden. They're doing it because of purely vengeful and spiteful means. And I can definitely see them doing it just because we made them angry for this particular case too.
Right.
And finally, kind of along these same veins, Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to censure Rashida Tlaib for her supposedly pro-Hamas remarks.
Right. She basically said the same things that we say about Israel and their defense. Like, is it defense at this point?
Well, and let's be clear here. The way that Marjorie Taylor Greene and other Freedom Caucus people or whoever is with her now, I don't know who it is, all are saying is the second that you start saying, hey, what's happening in Palestine is freaking awful, and we should probably start supporting the actual residents of Palestine to make sure they don't get bombed in the near future, they start saying that you're pro-Hamas.
Right.
Which is insane.
Or anti-Semitic, which, again, like, you can just be against innocents being killed everywhere.
Right.
And that to be a perfectly logically consistent statement. You support the fact that Israelis should be safe from being killed by Hamas, and also Palestinians should be safe from being killed by random bombings from Israel as
Absolutely.
well. Both of those things at the same time are perfectly acceptable views to hold, but not if you're in Congress, I guess.
Correct. And the good news is obviously the bill failed, with 23 Republicans voting against it, and all Democrats were
Which is
voting against it
surprising
as well.
to me, honestly.
That 23 Republicans voted against
Right.
it? Well, it was surprising to Marjorie. She was not happy. So what a first week for the House, with Mike Johnson at the helm, making things happen, but not really.
And more on him in just a little bit.
M&Ms will not be satisfied until every last cartoon character is deeply unappealing and totally androgynous. Until the moment you wouldn't want to have a drink with any one of them. That's the goal. When you're totally turned off, they've won.
Boy ain't right.
So you found this one. I don't know what this is.
We have a Halloween-themed Foxed in the Head for you today.
I'm ready.
Frequent contributor Jesse Waters makes a reappearance in this episode where he had something to say about those deadbeat dads who leave work early
Okay.
to take their kids trick-or-treating, the scumbags.
Now, I have not listened to this, so I'm scared. Oh, no.
Water's cooler. Business correspondent Madison Allworth. Madison, I have an issue we have to discuss.
Okay.
I've noticed today's Halloween and dads are leaving for work early. Now, I don't know if this is kosher, but dads are leaving for work at like 4 o'clock while it's still light out to go trick-or-treating with their children. Now, if I was 20 years old and I was trying to get started in the business and I would tell my office manager that I got to leave work early for Halloween to trick or treat, I don't know if that would go over too well. Am I wrong?
I think you're wrong because I think, as you probably know, we answer to our boss, but we also answer to our wives and to our children. And I know that my dad had to come on Halloween with me because we were elite trick-or-treaters. We had a lot of candy. I possibly could not carry all of it. Where does that candy need to go?
What do you mean?
Dad carries an extra pillowcase. You dump your candy in and you keep hitting houses. That is how you do a good Halloween crawl. And if you are calling out the dads that want their kids to get pillowcases full of candy, that's on you, Jesse. And I don't know if you want to be on that side of this.
You were
story.
elite.
Absolutely.
You were elite.
Come on. Yes.
Okay. What did you wear that was so elite that you got so much candy that your dad had to leave work early and leave everybody else high and dry so he could carry an extra sack?
It was not very creative. I'm half Indian. My mother's side is Indian, and I just love my culture, which is not a costume, and it's probably not PC, but I am Indian, and I was an Indian princess.
All right, so if you're Indian, you can dress up as an Indian. Otherwise, you can only cross-dress.
Indian princess from India.
All right,
anyway.
well,
So, of course,
What the
as usual,
hell was that?
everything has to be about drag or transgender at the end. He had to throw that in there.
Apparently. Because that's like just on his mind all the time.
Yeah, apparently it's what he's thinking about constantly. So, and he kept saying leave for work, leave from work, obviously. He does not want you to leave work early to go trick-or-treating with your kids if you're a dad. He didn't say anything about moms. I wonder why, even though his co-host there was a woman. No problem with moms leaving work early. That's what they're supposed to do. That's their job. Well, they shouldn't be at work.
There you go. I'm like, hey, you're misinterpreting.
Well, the mother of 2 of his children was actually his producer, who he had an affair with and left his wife for her, and they're married. So she was definitely in the workplace. I believe he joked about deflating her tires while she worked for him so that she would need to ask him for a ride, and then they would start dating. He said that he was joking afterwards, by the way, but it didn't sound like it.
That's creepy.
So yeah, he's a total creep. And he's got 4 kids, and they're all younger.
Oh, no.
He has never spent any time with them.
No.
They probably don't even know what he looks like.
Oh, my.
You should be at work 24 hours a day. How much do you want to bet? Like,
what?
Some intern or somebody working on his show, one of the writers maybe, had just asked to leave early. Like, I got to leave early because I got to take my kids trick-or-treating. And he's like, once the water's cooler is up, man, I'm lighting this guy up. How dare you leave work to go spend time with your family?
Well, that's kind of my thing. Like,
once a year.
What a weird take.
And it's not like...
I've never heard this take before in my life.
Right. And it's not like you can trick or treat at any time during the day on Halloween. Like, it's every area has got specific times, and it's usually only a couple hours.
Right.
So yeah, it is a specific time. I have to leave now so that we can go trick or treating. It's once a year. Give me a break.
Well, for God's sakes, like, I'm thinking way too much about the logic of this thing because it's just not. But the idea of trying to be a good family dad, they talk about that all the freaking time.
Right. That's the problem with crime in urban neighborhoods, right? Is kids grew up without fathers.
Well, and also, like, wouldn't you expect that a bunch of these dads probably just take an hour of PTO? Like, what do you... What is going on? I truly, I cannot even understand where Jesse Waters is coming from with this. Also, I just want to point that out there.
Well, like I said, I guarantee you somebody on his staff had just asked to leave early to go trick-or-treating with their kids. And that's where this is coming from, is him being upset that you would dare ask for time off to spend with your family for such a girly thing as going trick-or-treating with your kids. Where's your wife? I guarantee you that's what his thought process
Well, that's what he says. Like, what's so important that he has to leave everyone high and dry at work to go carry an extra sack for you? What? What's going on? I'm blown away. Also, I just want to point that out there. That woman that he was talking with was a Madison whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She absolutely, I don't care what her name actually is.
Allworth.
Or whatever.
Yeah. Not Madison Cawthorn. That's different.
She absolutely gets harassed at Fox News. There is no way she does not get harassed when the cameras are off at Fox News. There is no way. Even just like with that little interaction, you saw it where like she like just put it. She said a couple things.
Well, he even was like, "What did you wear when you were a kid?"
Well, and that
was creepy.
You saw how Jesse cringed when he's like, "Well, and I love my culture." Oh,
right. My culture is not a costume, so maybe.
Get out!
And that's why he had to like instinctively like I have to push back against that by being transphobic, which is what he did at the end, just to try to balance out like how dare you try to bring up some sort of
race
idea that you shouldn't wear people's cultures as a costume on Halloween.
Well, also, did you notice how he immediately
what would Brett Weinstein say?
Right, but did you know how he immediately screwed up where she said, and obviously my culture is not a costume, and his response was, "Oh, so because you're Indian, you are the only who can wear an Indian for Halloween or be an Indian for Halloween."
Yes.
Like, no. Well, no. Even then, what she said was, "I'm not going to probably just go as an Indian for Halloween. That would be crazy because that's my cultural get."
Right.
And his response is, "Oh, you get special privileges. Only you can be an Indian for Halloween." What, Jesse?
Right.
But again, that's like another big thing with people like this. Tucker Carlson was the same way. Sean Hannity's the same way. And you would even argue that a lot of people like on MSNBC are like this as well. So I'm not even going to say, I'm not saying this is a both sides thing necessarily, but also like this is kind of like what happens in this industry is the amount of defensiveness coming from these people because the clips and segments are so short. They are terrified of looking bad in a split second, right? And they have to fight every single second, no matter what happens. I have to fight for my stance, no matter what is being said. And you see like those stupid little quips like you just talked about where, like I have to say something really quick to get the last word in and to sound like strong to my audience.
Right.
God forbid I say, "Oh, that's a good point" on my program.
Right. Or, gee, I never thought of that. It would be offensive to you if someone else were to wear traditional Indian, I don't know what the sarong or whatever the dress is as a costume, like how you might actually be offended by that because it's someone adopting your culture for fun, which is, it's important to you and shouldn't just be something to be adopted and thrown away the next day.
Well, it's just this macho BS. That's all it is.
And also he just wanted to know what she was wearing because he's
that was so weird. Also, I just want to throw out there the Waters cooler. I hate that. It's so dumb.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? It's hard to get any word in with this clown.
For our main topic today, we are going to talk about, as we said, the new Speaker of the House, Republican representative from Louisiana, Mike Johnson, and how we got here. As you know, last episode when we left off, Jim Jordan had just lost his bid for the Speaker because everyone in Congress hates him after 3 rounds of voting in which he kept getting less and less votes each time. It was convened for the weekend, and they were going to come up with a new candidate on Monday. And on that Monday, they came up with Tom Emmer, who was the Republican whip, a very moderate Republican, even if there is such a thing these days.
From Minnesota.
Certainly not an extremist by any means. And his designation. I learned what it is. I couldn't remember a couple weeks ago, but it's the speaker designate.
Yep.
So he was the speaker designate for
I believe 4 hours.
a few hours. Most people say that he was torpedoed by the true leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, who, after learning that Emmer was the speaker designate, posted on Truth Social with his really weird avatar that we've talked about before. I have many wonderful friends wanting to be Speaker of the House, and some of them are truly great warriors.
Why is that one capped? I don't understand.
Random capitalization is like so normal for Trump at this point. I don't even see it. Rhino Tom Emmer, who I do not know well, is not one of them.
And also, sorry, I love how that's always an insult for him. I don't know this guy, therefore he's bad.
I think he brought me a cup of coffee once. He never respected the power of a Trump endorsement or the breadth and scope of MAGA, Make America Great Again, in case anyone forgot.
All caps, baby.
He fought me all the way and actually spent more time defending Ilhan Omar, she's a terrorist, than he did me. He is totally out of touch with Republican voters. I believe he has now learned his lesson because he is saying he is pro-Trump all the way, but who can ever be sure? Has he only changed because that's what it takes to win? The Republican Party cannot take that chance because that's not where the America First voters are. Voting for a globalist rhino like Tom Emmer would be a tragic mistake.
Dude, Truth Social needs a character limit. That's too much.
Trump's account will never have a character limit on Truth Social.
Oh, God. A globalist rhino.
So yes, Tom Emmer is a globalist rhino. He's out of touch with Republican voters. I never met the guy. I don't know the guy. He was never my lawyer. And that was the end of Tom Emmer.
He immediately resigned.
Didn't even get to a vote on
Nope.
the House floor.
So then a new name comes up, and that is Mike Johnson.
Someone who no one has ever heard of before.
Nope. Although we actually kind of have, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
Right, in a way.
Yeah.
And then immediately the Republicans start putting out videos, which we didn't see before, about how they're all united behind Mike Johnson. There's all this cheering. Someone asked how he can resolve being the Speaker of the House with the fact that he tried to overturn the election in 2020.
Yep.
And everyone started booing the reporter, some old biddy.
Yeah.
It was screaming for the
Shut
reporter
up!
to shut up.
Shut up!
I'd have punched the Werther's Originals right out of her mouth.
And he won it with unanimous vote.
For the first time
in 3 weeks.
We finally had a Republican Speaker of the House. So who is this guy? Who is Mike Johnson? No one, we didn't have him on any of our previous lists that we talked about for who could possibly be the next Republican Speaker. Where did this guy come from? Who is he?
So Mike Johnson was elected as Louisiana. Oh, wow.
Did they only elect him because it's impossible to Google Mike Johnson?
I mean, very true. I bet you any might, yes. So Mike Johnson was elected as a Louisiana state rep in 2015 and then to Congress in 2016. So very green in the governance area.
Yeah, I remember when I was like, well, it's not going to be Elise Stefanik because she hasn't been there long enough.
Right.
Apparently that doesn't matter.
One of the first things you should probably know.
And as that reporter was asking about,
Johnson is a hardcore 2020 election denier and actually did all he could to try to help overturn the 2020 election.
And will likely do the same if Trump were to lose the election next year.
During an interview with a local Louisiana radio station, Johnson said this.
You know, in every election in American history, there's some small element of fraud, irregularity, error. We just know that. You just accept that that's the case. But when you have it on a broad scale, when you have, a software system that is used all around the country that is suspect because it came from Hugo Chavez's Venezuela, when you have, testimonials of people like this, but in large numbers, it begs to be litigated and investigated.
Yay, he's a conspiracy theorist. He's a MyPillow freak.
We talked about this in one of like our very first episodes.
Hugo Chavez, who's been dead for years, overturned the election because he owns Dominion Software. This is why people are getting sued for like $1 billion.
Yep.
Yay. New Speaker of the House.
While Jim Jordan was taking the brunt of the public while trying to overturn the 2020 election, Mike Johnson was behind the scenes, literally doing all the coup stuff. He organized more than 100 House Republicans to sign onto an amicus brief filed in support of a lawsuit from Texas's Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton, asking the U.S. Supreme Court to invalidate Biden's wins in 4 states that gave him his winning margin in the Electoral College. You may know them as Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and of course, Wisconsin.
Yay, good thing he tried to overturn our votes.
He also publicly praised Rudy Giuliani, saying, quote, "He seems to be right on everything."
Yeah, his assistant really does have some nice tits.
And on January 6th, just before Trump supporters overran the Capitol, Johnson tweeted, quote, "We must," all caps, "fight for election integrity, the Constitution, and the preservation of our republic. It will be my honor to help lead that fight in Congress today." And of course, after the attack, he still voted to overturn the election results. But that's not all Mike Johnson is. See, you need to know that Mike Johnson,
he is a fervent Christian nationalist, to the extreme of which no one that I've seen is his equal anywhere in Congress. If Pat Robertson wasn't dead, he would have the largest erection of his life right now, with Mike Johnson being second in line to be president.
and don't take our word, take Mike Johnson's.
I am a Bible-believing Christian. Someone asked me today in the media, they said, it's curious, people are curious, what does Mike Johnson think about any issue under the sun? I said, well, go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That's my worldview. That's what I believe.
That was from a recent interview with Sean Hannity.
And boy, is he not lying.
Right. It's not just that he says that. And I will say they immediately tried to paper over that. Like Hannity had the script because he said, like, as soon as he got done saying that, well, that's your personal beliefs. And like that was the prompt. And then was, yes, that's my personal beliefs. But everyone in Congress has personal beliefs. But I believe in the rule of law. Everything this guy has done in his life leading up to this has shown that it is more than just his personal beliefs, and he's fine to just let everyone live how they want to live. No.
So let's talk about that. First and foremost, he was a former attorney for the Alliance Defending Freedom. And if you guys don't remember that, that is the literal anti-LGBT hate group that is behind every single bad religion court case that we've probably talked about in the last 3 years. If you remember the Masterpiece Cake Shop, Alliance Defending Freedom. If you remember that recent 303 Creative case, Alliance Defending Freedom. All of the
Josh
worst.
Hawley's wife works for.
Yeah, it's all of the literal worst people put together in one like Disney villain organization.
But they hate Disney.
Yes. Oh boy, they hate Disney. He also, and actually I didn't know this, represented Ken Ham when he wanted to use taxpayer funds to build the Ark Encounter in Kentucky. Now, one of my favorite bits about people finding out about this, Jason, is we know about the Ark Encounter. Mm-hmm. We know about Ken Ham and the Creation Museum. I've learned that we're weird and other people don't know about those things.
Yeah, when I heard about this story, like they talk about it like there's this weird museum in Kentucky. Like you didn't hear about this when they built this?
Oh no.
They had all these tax credits for it, and
I felt really attacked by the amount of ignorance I've heard about this.
And it got damaged during a rainstorm.
And has been losing millions of dollars ever since it was built. But yes, for those of you who do not know, the Ark Encounter is the creationist Noah's Ark themed theme park.
All right, it's run by Answers in Genesis, the same people that have the Creationist Museum. They teach that dinosaurs and humans were alive at the same time, which is just so not true that it hurts me deeply.
I still really want to go, man. Can we go one day?
You can go. I don't want to go to Kentucky for any reason.
And for our Wisconsin listeners, no, it is not like Noah's Ark, the water park.
Yeah, it's not that cool.
It's literally just a gigantic replica with really crappy...
Replica of a fake thing that never existed.
Point taken. Model? What do you want to call it? Thing. It's
representation.
Sure. With like really crappy diagrams, or what are they called? What's it called?
Dioramas?
Dioramas of like standstill figures of how animals are going to fit in the ark. It's apparently really bad. I've heard that. Like not even like from an ideological standpoint, it's just like a bad waste of money. And that's why I want to go, Jason.
And if weird young Earth creationist theme parks aren't enough for you,
And if you want some other great examples of how much of a Christian nationalist this guy actually is, I'm just going to put a link in our show notes to Hemant Mehta's blog, who did a very good, extensive project on how this guy actually conducts himself. So I just want to give you a couple other very fun points from this article. Johnson says, Christian pseudo-historian and notorious liar David Barton has had a profound influence on me and my work and my life and everything I do. He is like the right-wing historian who just literally lies about history to appease
I thought that
conservatives.
was Dinesh D'Souza.
Him too. Johnson filed legislation forcing witnesses in front of House committees to use the religious phrase, "So help me God," in their oaths.
Which is funny, as an atheist. So help me God might as well be saying Kalatu Barata Nikto. It means nothing.
Johnson supported Louisiana law that required student athletes to stand during the national anthem, and they're not going to bend over and bow to atheists and secular
Jingoism.
groups.
Yeah, like North Korea. That's fine.
And of course, Johnson has lied numerous times and falsely claimed that the U.S. is the only nation founded on a religious statement of faith, and said Thomas Jefferson's support for separation of church and state is a complete lie.
The Treaty of Tripoli, I guess that never happened. That's like the Earth being billions of years old. It's just a lie.
Oh, and of course, he thinks that pastors should be able
Satan
to...
buried those bones.
And of course, he also thinks pastors should be able to endorse political candidates from the pulpit. So that's cool.
Yeah, forget the Johnson Amendment.
So yeah, check out that entire article. It's really good. I won't go into the whole thing, but Hemant did a great job with that. You also may remember back in 2022, last year,
I don't remember this at
we
all.
talked about a guy who freaked the hell out about FX's animated show, Little Demon, where he posted a long screed and then got like the internet backlash of a lifetime phenomenon about how stupid and like stick up his butt he was about the whole thing. You don't remember that?
Nope.
We covered
I didn't even know this show existed. I like Aubrey Plaza. I like Danny DeVito.
Well,
I've never seen the show.
He was the guy that famously tried to criticize it and called the whole thing satanic and be careful, it's going to damage our kids forever.
Yeah, this show that's for adults is going to damage children.
But the problem is this guy has been removing all this stuff now ever since he became speaker. There have been reports of their like website, how they've been linking homosexuality to bestiality. That's been getting deleted left and right. There are videos they've been deleting.
The website that hosted their podcast, he does a podcast with his wife. That's gone.
You want Jason?
His wife's business website
is gone. Yep.
The Facebook post about the Little Demon show that we talked about
is gone.
We'll play an audio clip in a second from a 2016 sermon that he did at the Christian Center in Shreveport, Louisiana. The full video of that on YouTube is now made private.
Yep.
So you can't access that anymore. Everything to do with this guy and his Christian nationalist history is being scrubbed from the internet.
Yep. Also, I want to put it out there to help research for this thing, Jason. I did it. I listened to his podcast. I did it for you.
Yeah, well, good for you. I wasn't going that far. This is only something we do on the side here. I don't get paid for this. So, the clip from that sermon that I was talking about, in case you thought maybe he would do something about gun control. You know, we talked about that mass shooting that happened in Maine. That's kind of what's important. That's what been on everyone's minds lately. Or maybe some of the other bigger issues in the country. Abortion rights, that's a big thing, right? That's been very prominent in the last few elections, probably will continue to be in the future. Maybe he will be able to get something passed with this Speaker of the House. Well, listen to this clip and we'll see how likely that will be.
You remember in the late 60s, we invented things like no-fault divorce laws. We invented the sexual revolution. We invented radical feminism. We invented legalized abortion in 1973, where the state, the government, sanctions the killing of the unborn. I mean, we know that we're living in a completely amoral society. And so people say, how can a young person go into their schoolhouse and open fire on their classmates? Because we've taught a whole generation, a couple of generations now of Americans, that there is no right and wrong.
So probably not. Yeah, probably not going to get any bills up for vote to codify abortion rights. I'm not going to get any gun control because apparently the reason for mass shootings is feminism. It's generally men that do them, right? I'm not sure why women are to blame for them, but apparently you are. It's all your fault. Yeah, this is great. This is going to be great. It's going to be great for people making ads, running against anyone that voted to make this guy speaker.
Yep. I love the idea of saying the radical feminism of the 60s. Also, I want to put out there as well, he also said he blamed divorce for school shootings.
No-fault divorce.
This guy hates no-fault divorce. And in fact,
Steven Crowder's happy about this one.
And again, I think we should do an episode on this sometime in the future.
I know. You've been pushing it.
This guy is a hardcore proponent of covenant marriage, which is basically making you sign a legally binding contract that makes divorce almost impossible.
Sounds great.
So great.
Your wife better give that dog medication, damn it, even though she's pregnant, and that it says on the bottle that pregnant women shouldn't handle it. Just put on a glove. Steven Crowder reference there, in case you didn't catch that.
We're on women in divorce. Let's play the other clip about how he feels about Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade gave constitutional cover to the elective killing of unborn children in America, period. You think about the implications of that on the economy. We're all struggling here to cover the bases of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all the rest. If we had all those able-bodied workers in the economy, we wouldn't be going upside down and toppling over like this. Listen,
the gentleman,
I will not yield. I will not. Roe was a terrible corruption of America's constitutional jurisprudence.
So can we just talk about the idea of, well, if we just got rid of abortion, we'd have all these people in the workforce.
They would all be taxpayers.
Our economy
but I
would
thought
be
tax
fine.
is theft, isn't it? To Republicans.
What is going on?
Yeah, that's you should just have babies so that we can get their income in taxes. Except we're going to get rid of the IRS. Consistency is not something that the Republican and conservative worldview can withstand. But no, you should be forced to have that baby so that he can pay taxes
for the sake of the economy.
Really, what they mean is then their labor can be exploited,
Jason,
by capitalists.
Can we go protest at a Planned Parenthood and just start saying, "But what about the economy?" And just see what happens.
Right. That baby could be working for minimum wage in 12 years.
Don't you understand?
They can shovel coal, damn it. They can get in those little narrow, tight spaces.
But that also kind of reminds me of like that, oh God, who was it? Was it Ken Paxton or whoever it was?
This guy hates women.
Right. Oh, shocker. He's a fervent Christian. What do you think? Wait, wasn't it Ken Paxton who said like during the pandemic?
Right, the old people should get back to work because they'll
die for the economy.
Right.
That's kind of what I'm getting the vibes from this. It's like, you should just ruin your life for the economy.
Mm-hmm. We got more bad news coming in case you were hoping for anything good from Mike Johnson. He also published a few op-eds.
Because of course he did.
In the Shreveport The Times, which is the newspaper from Shreveport, Louisiana, in September of 2004. We'll link all the articles. He wrote an op-ed against same-sex marriage. Quote, homosexual relationships are inherently unnatural, and the studies clearly show, no citations of what studies he's talking about.
But there's studies.
And they clearly show
they do.
Homosexual relationships are ultimately harmful and costly for everyone. Society cannot give its stamp of approval to such a dangerous lifestyle. If we change marriage for this tiny modern minority, we will have to do it for every deviant group.
Oh, there it is.
Homosexuality never existed outside of modern times.
What? Okay, wait, hang on. Can we just also talk about the fact that it's tiny? And the fact that if we gave...
minorities are generally tiny. That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, but the whole thing is, he said that if LGBTQ people get married, that it would be harmful for everybody in society.
And costly. Because again, it's all about the economy.
But it's a tiny group of people. What are we talking about? So even in his own op-ed,
again,
he refutes
consistency.
He refutes himself.
Don't look for consistency, but he continues. And, intellectual giant Mike Johnson, we're going to get some great legal theory here. Remember, he's a lawyer. Polygamists, polyamorous, pedophiles, and others will be the next in line to claim equal protection.
Just others.
They already are. There will be no legal basis to deny a bisexual the right to marry a partner of each sex or a person to marry his pet.
What?
Whoa, what a legal scholar Mike Johnson is. If we allow two consenting adults of the same sex to marry, then you can marry your Labrador. There's no difference. It's the same thing. No legal basis to deny you marrying inanimate objects if homosexual marriages are allowed.
Fantastic.
We also have a July 2003 op-ed in the same paper.
Can I also probably just say, you know for a fact this guy has definitely said it's Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve. You know he did.
And he's also masturbated to gay porn. Yeah, probably both of those things, yes. In a 2003 op-ed in the same paper, he decried the Supreme Court ruling in Lawrence v. Texas that overturned a Texas statute criminalizing sodomy. Quote, prescriptions against sodomy have deep roots in religion, politics, and law. States have always maintained the right to discourage the evils of sexual conduct outside marriage.
Jesus Christ, man.
And the state is right to discriminate between heterosexual and homosexual conduct, since the latter cannot occur within the confines of marriage.
Wait, again. We will not let these people get married. And because we won't let them get married, we're going to then
they can't have sex.
We're then going to punish them.
And he's saying all sex outside of marriage shouldn't be allowed.
I know. Oh my God.
This guy is hardcore Christian nationalist. He goes on, homosexuals do not meet the criteria for a suspect class under the Equal Protection Clause because they are neither disadvantaged nor identified on the basis of immutable characteristics, as all are capable of changing their abnormal lifestyles.
Ew, no. I was really confused where he was going with that for that first part. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sure they've never been disadvantaged before.
Right.
In the sense that
as I'm trying to discriminate against them.
As I'm literally making sure I put them down in their place. But then I'm like, oh no, he's going to do the whole thing where it's like, it's not immutable,
it's a
is
choice.
he? And then, yep, there it goes. Oh, there it goes.
It's like, I'm attracted to men. Every day I choose not to have sex with one, so why can't they? That's what it reminds me, right? Like,
yes.
If you think that it's just a choice and you can turn it on and off, like, does that mean that you're gay? Like, I'm sorry, you're either bisexual or gay if you think it's a choice and you're, supposedly straight man. Because I'm not attracted to men. I don't think it's a choice that I made. It's just who I am. It's who I've always been. That's why I never would ever tell anyone that their sexuality is a choice because it wasn't for me.
Right.
So what the hell is going on with this guy?
I will say this guy really brings me back to like the early 2010s of the atheist movement, where
that's some old school like
creationist, conservative Christian stuff,
Right. This is definitely both of our backgrounds.
Yeah.
And the things we left behind to be like, well, actually, the bigger issue is just politics in general and not so much religion. But
and the very naive, these people aren't like super in power. We don't have to worry about them as much. Next thing you know, he's literally second in line for the presidency.
Right.
Oh, God.
Yeah, just a dominionist, hardcore. He was literally an ADF lawyer. You can't get more into that world.
So to finish this off, what should we look forward to with Mike Johnson as speaker?
Doom.
I wasn't ready for that.
If you thought that Republicans didn't vote for Jim Jordan because he was too extreme and they didn't like his politics, you were wrong.
Well, correct.
It's just because Jim Jordan is an asshole.
And is too well known for being an asshole.
That's the only reason. Mike Johnson is Jim Jordan.
And Mike Johnson and Jim Jordan are the GOP. 100%.
Yeah. And what we talked about after Roe v. Wade got overturned, right? Are they going to come after same-sex marriage? Yes.
Obviously.
Are they going to come after sex outside of marriage? Yes. Are they going to come after
birth control?
Yeah, your right to birth control. Yes. Are they going to come after mixed race relationships? Probably. Like with this guy as the speaker.
Well, and again, one of the things that I learned from his podcast I listened to.
Because it didn't say in the Bible that people of other races could marry.
Well, and the other thing is like what I learned from his podcast that I had to listen to for this damn thing.
Yeah, good job.
And
it's been very relevant up to this point.
It really was. I'm glad I spent the time doing it.
Mm-hmm.
He fervently believes it is a misconception that politics and religion should not be intertwined. He believes that religion should guide your politics the entire way through and that we should have a religious government.
The same stuff that Lauren Boebert has said.
Correct. This guy is a Christian extremist. Absolutely. He'll also lie and say that how his views are not controversial at all and actually that it's the same views as the founding fathers.
Yeah, that's
not true at all. So
the founding fathers that like only Alexander Hamilton was very religious and no one else was.
Right.
Jefferson took all of the supernatural stuff out of the Bible.
Yep. George Washington wasn't even that.
George Washington left his church.
Right. So here's my potential hot take with Mike Johnson. Is it bad that Mike Johnson is elected speaker? Absolutely. Was it going to be really much of anything super different than anybody else that was going to run for that spot? I don't think so.
No one that was actually going to get it. No.
Well, and I'm talking about even like Kevin McCarthy or Steve Scalise.
Right. I mean,
like they would have done the exact same thing. And I made this argument before with Kevin McCarthy, and you've got the exact same thing with Steve Scalise as well. And I bet you anyway with Tom Emmer too. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between a moderate who panders to the extreme right versus a true believer?
Yeah, that's the difference. The Tom Emmers of the world don't really care about religion, but they still have to bow down to that base.
Correct. And the result can be basically the same anyway. So I don't think it's going to be that much different. The fact that we got crazy Mike Johnson compared to someone like even Jim Jordan or Kevin McCarthy.
And it might even, like I said, be a blessing in disguise in which anyone running against any Republican, they all voted for this guy, can just say, hey, this is who you ultimately supported. This is your guy. And then play any of those clips, show any of those quotes from the op-eds, calling homosexuals animals, blaming women for the downfall of society, saying that abortion is murder and will lead to the ruin of civilization. Anybody concerned about any of those rights that we talked about, gay marriage, any abortion rights, rights to birth control, any kind of privacy in your own bedroom. The Republicans just elected as their leader in the House a guy who thinks that the Bible trumps all of those rights.
Correct.
And his interpretation of the Bible is that marriage is between a man and a woman, sex is for procreation only, and he should be allowed to not only know what you're doing in your bedroom, but dictate what you should be doing.
Correct. But here's what scares me though, Jason, is this guy seems to be perfect to push the Overton window far to the right because he is quiet, he is well-tempered, and he has that folksy Southern drawl. He's going to say crazy ass things in a very nice way with a smile on his face, and people are going to think that's just normal Christian biblical crap. And he's going to keep spewing it more and more and more, and it's going to fall by the wayside because he's not screaming it like Jim Jordan does. And
while covering up the molestation of hundreds of children.
So that's what scares the crap out of me, is that you're going to have a lot of people who are going to not necessarily support him, but be indifferent of him because of how quiet and how well-mannered he is. And I truly believe that, I mean, this is the exact same playbook that like the alt-right used when they're trying to push their literal neo-Nazi rhetoric down people's throats, where they dressed nicely, they said things very eloquently, and talked hardcore, crazy neo-Nazi stuff. And people believed it. And I believe the exact same thing is going to happen with this as well. And to make it even worse is Mike Johnson is a symbol. He's a symbol, like we talked about before, that the Republican Party that our parents knew, that our grandparents knew, is absolutely gone. There is no such thing as a moderate Republican anymore. They are literally all crazy in the Congress. There's no such thing as a typical moderate Republican person in an elected position anymore. And they know that too. So what we're going to end on is our favorite person, Matt Gaetz of Florida.
The person who basically engineered
this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I want you to hear him take his victory lap on Steve Bannon's War Room.
And the swamp is on the run. MAGA is ascendant. And if you don't think that moving from Kevin McCarthy to MAGA Mike Johnson shows the ascendance of this movement and where the power in the Republican Party truly lies, then you're not paying attention.
So get ready, everybody. It's MAGA Mike Johnson time. Thank you for listening. We hope to see you in the next episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at ThinkProPod. You can email us at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively. Hello.
My name is Elder Joe.
And I would like to share with you this most amazing book.